Hi, my name is Esther Kustanowitz, and my favorite thing is looking for Jewish representation in TV and popular culture.
Welcome to the Finding Favorites podcast, where we explore your favorite things without using an algorithm. Here's your host, Leah Jones.
Hello and welcome to Finding Favorites. I'm your host, Leah Jones, and it is hopefully still Sunday, February 20th when I release this. I totally get that it may not be. The weekend got away from me, and to the point where maybe I should consider doing a Monday release instead of trying to keep up with Sundays. But I had a really lovely weekend. My energy continues to return. I have finished chemotherapy. I'm now like a month out from my last chemotherapy infusion. I've been on some steroid inhalers, so my lungs are recovering. I still can't walk more than a couple blocks, and I'm using a cane, but I'm not running out of breath doing household chores. I'm not doing a lot of chores yet, but like I can make coffee, I can cook a grilled cheese sandwich. So that's a huge improvement. I had the loveliest weekend. I had dinner with one of my nephews last night. He came up to Ravenswood and we had tacos and just caught up. It was so nice. And then this afternoon, my twin sister and her youngest and two of his buddies came up and we went to the Blackhawks matinee and saw live hockey. And that was super fun. And it's a Sunday of a 3-day weekend. So things only get better from here. This weekend, I also managed to squeeze in 2 interviews. I talked with today's guest, Esther Kustanowitz, and I talked with next weekend's guest, Jane Martin. And so I'm having a lot of fun doing interviews again. Shai Corman probably is going to come back in March and help me out. I've got 3 weeks of radiation coming up, and I think I know well enough that keeping up with things might be too difficult. So I hope that you have a wonderful week and that you get your booster, get your vaccine, wear a mask, wash your hands, and keep enjoying your favorite things. Hello and welcome to Finding Favorites. This is the podcast where we learn about people's favorite things without using an algorithm. I almost said it's 2021. It's 2022, which means that some of my guests have had enough time to find a new favorite thing. And that is true today. Today, I am very excited that Esther Kustanowitz is back. You know Esther from The Bagel Report. You know her from her reporting across Jewish newspapers. You know her from TV Gone Jewy, which you've seen at festivals, Limud, and online. And also, I believe one of the co-founders of SoCal Jewish News.
I'm kind of on the leadership team.
Launch committee?
Launch, sure. Founding
the leadership committee.
Team person,
okay.
Advisor, something. Like,
okay.
Unclear. We don't really have like titles, so that's
okay.
Yeah.
You are a founding voice. How about that?
Sure. I'm a voice.
Esther, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thanks, Leah. How are you?
I'm good.
Yeah.
It looks like we have the same amount of sunshine. I see sun coming in your windows. I mean, but you are in Southern California, so it's more normal for you.
Yes, it is more normal. It's actually, I hesitate when I'm talking to people in Chicago and New York to say that it's cold today because it's really lovely, but it's a little cooler than we think. And the weather here probably in pace with the rest of the nation has been wildly erratic. So, it'll go from like one morning it'll be 55 degrees and then like the next afternoon it'll be like 90. So it's really not hard. It's really not hardship level weather, but it is kind of disconcerting because it's always changing.
I feel like 90 degrees in January, February is disturbing. That seems concerning to me.
Yeah, I mean, LA is always the weather's always higher anyway. The temperature's always higher. You know, I think also 90 isn't the same 90 as it is in New York or Chicago, I don't think. Because here, I remember the first year I moved here from New York, and I heard on the radio, back when we used to listen to radio, you know, I heard on the radio that it was going to be something like 116 degrees in the valley, which is always hotter than the city, which is where I live. And I was like, 116 degrees. I'm not going outside today. I mean, that's ridiculous. Like, why would I leave my apartment? But I had to leave my apartment for just like, you know, just to do something or run an errand or something. And I left and I was like, well, first of all, I'm in the city, so it's not 116. What is it, 96? And I was like, 96 seems high for what I'm experiencing in my body. And the reality is it didn't feel like it was higher than 80. And I think that's because of there's no humidity here. So it's like it's a different feeling. And, you know, in New York, when it's 90 degrees, you want to just lick an ice cube and, you know, sit in your apartment because you don't want to go anywhere. But, you know, here it was just like, you know, people who are here all their lives complain about how hot it was. But for me coming from New York, I was just like, you know what, this is actually pretty dreamy. So I'm not going to complain.
So you've become someone who says it's not the heat, it's the humidity.
Yes. Well, I always said that. Because it was always the Jerusalem-Tel Aviv divide also. You know, it could be hot in both of those cities, but Jerusalem always has that nice breeze at night especially. Yeah. And Tel Aviv, it's just like, you know, your sweat is sweating. And our mutual friend Benji Levitt likes to say that, you know, he took a shower, but he was sweating in the shower, so there was no point or something like that. So I don't like that kind of weather, but I don't mind sunshine, and I'm looking outside. There's a nice little breeze, you know, rustling the trees. Yeah. Saying hey. Yeah.
Yeah. We had a real wild storm the other night. Welcome to Favorite Things, or Finding Favorites, where we talk about the weather. And that's what we do. But we had a pretty wild storm on Thursday night. And then yesterday we got our first, I had never seen a snow squall alert on my phone before. And that's been working its way east. I saw people in New York posting about it today. But
isn't it a squall like water oriented? Is it about, I thought it was like, had to do with being on boats.
I mean, we're close to we're on Lake Michigan. It was this sudden, quick, rapidly moving snowstorm that, I mean, people in Detroit, it lasted like 10 or 15 minutes and then it was gone. But if you were on the roads in those 10 or 15 minutes, it was really dangerous.
Yeah. I mean, I know the way LA people, like deal with weather of any varying sort as disastrous. But I actually just looked up squall, and it said that it's about the suddenness of the appearing of a storm, like a sudden sharp increase in wind speed or a violent gust of wind or whatever. And we don't really have that so much here. And when we have rain, especially the first rains of the season, somebody said this to me when I first moved to LA, and I thought they were out of their mind because it sounds like such an insane thing. But they're like, when it rains, the oils come up from the ground. And I was like, is this biblical? Like the oils emerge from the ground? But like, it's actually true that I don't know if it's the asphalt or whatever, but like it collects oil the first time it rains so that it is slick and slippery. So people don't know how to deal with those kinds of weather conditions because it just happens a couple of times a year. And if they miss it, they miss it. But they never really learn how to drive in snow the way Chicagoans do. Sure.
I remember being in LA once for work or whatever. And it was not snowing. It was raining. It was a pretty strong rain. The weather was getting backed up. But as we came around a corner, this was like a 4-lane wide highway, interstate, whatever you guys call them.
Freeway?
Turned a corner and saw a police car zigzagging across all the 4 lanes to slow the traffic down to save people from themselves.
Oh, boy.
Because they were like, it's about to get bad. And they created the traffic jam, I think, truly to save people from their own bad instincts.
Wow. That sounds like the move of a desperate police force.
Yeah.
but like, it's like, we are going to save you from yourselves. Like that's pretty proactive for a police department. So
Yeah. It's how when I moderate Facebook groups, that's how I treat moderating the group. When I see people like getting really heated, I'm like, I'm going to save you from yourselves. And I'm going to close the comments here. I'm going to turn on like post approval. Because sometimes people they get real heated and can't make a good decision.
Yeah. No, and it's good of you to both give them the space to kind of live in that space a little bit and do what they're going to do. And then for you to come in and say, you know what? I think we're done here. Because, it's not about shutting down the entire conversation before it starts. It's knowing when something is not a conversation anymore, when it's just negativity or, just bad juju.
Yeah. So the last time you were here, we talked about Star Wars. And since then, there's been Boba Fett. I think I don't even know if maybe the Mandalorian had come out yet, but we didn't know Baby Yoda was Grogu. Yeah. Hasn't there been some other show other than Boba Fett and Mandalorian? Wasn't there like a third one?
A third Star Wars? I don't there
maybe
were
not.
other I don't think
there's
so.
There's the cartoons.
Yeah, there's always more cartoons. I will say that, like, as much as I've said on the last show that my Star Wars was my favorite, I'm not as immersed in every aspect of the world the way a lot of other people are. So, like, for instance, I've been listening to a lot of like kind of breakdown podcasts about the Mandalorian and then about the Book of Boba Fett. And, they're introducing characters that like, they're like, can you believe this character appeared in the last episode? I'm like, I don't know who that is. And this is me saying it out loud, not to them because they're not having me on their podcast. But they're talking about like these characters from the animated series that are part of this whole world that I don't know anything about. And I just feel like I'm at the point in my life where I'm not going to go back and watch like 4 to 6 seasons of cartoons in order to get up to speed for the next episode. So I'm like, okay, well, this is a character who appears in the Clone Wars. Okay, great.
Yep.
That's what I know.
I have not watched Clone Wars. I have not watched Mandalorian or the Book of Boba Fett, but I know what character you're talking about because Paul Scheer and Jason Mantzoukas were just talking about it. They're like, oh my gosh, when so-and-so shows up and it's such and such from the... Yeah, I know. Yeah. I know what character you're referencing because I too have heard the podcasts. I think his name is
Cad Bane, I believe. And he's this blue-faced somebody. But like for a lot of people, they're like, oh shit, here he comes. It's Cad Bane. I'm like, Bane? Is every series have somebody named Bane? Because I know Bane's in in Batman. And I think
Batman
like there's
or
Bane
something?
Yeah. It was which I don't remember which Batman it was, but there's Bane. There's always somebody named Bane. It's like Bane. There's something about, I think it's like Wolf's Bane is like poisonous. So I think, and it's just a very strong name. But I kind of feel like find another name.
Yeah.
Just like I think it's Batman and Superman both have mothers who are Martha. Like why?
Oh, how weird.
Or something like that.
Right.
So I was like, well, what? Just get a new name. Just
right. Yeah, it would be
Mindy.
like
there you go.
Yeah, done.
Right. I don't know. The thing is, Leah, no one asks me about these things. Like, Esther, what would you do?
If you could time travel and rename the ancillary characters of DC and Marvel superhero origin stories, what would you name them and why?
Sure. I mean, the primordial question,
Yeah.
Everybody wants to know the answer to.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, but I think, not to transition for you, but I feel like that's very, very connected to what I'm here to talk about in terms of my favorites today.
Yes.
So,
And what are we here to talk about today, Esther?
So, my other favorite thing, or one of my other favorites, because we are plural here at Finding Favorites, is looking for and finding Jewish representation in pop culture, but generally also in general in pop culture, but specifically on television. And how I would have loved to have seen like a Marvel character named like, I don't know, like Shimona or something like that. Or, you know, just like some sort of, if not Hebrew or Israeli, some sort of biblical name that actually is coding for this is a Jewish character or this is a character with a Jewish background. And there certainly are characters across the pantheon of all Marvel, DC, Star Wars. Well, not Star Wars. Star Wars actually does not really have Judaism in it. You have to really read into it, which I do. But Luke is super Christian. That's a Christian name. Yeah.
But Leia's a Jewish name, even though she spells it wrong.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot you could read in. Luke Skywalker is actually he's Luke S, which is, you know,
George Lucas.
Is Lucas. Yeah, so it's less about the religion of the religions of the world and more about the religion of yourself.
Right.
But
it's more about narcissism than Christianity.
Right. Well, Luke Skywalker was originally Luke Starkiller, but he was always Luke S. So so that's, you know, and then everything gets built around that. So
yeah. When did you start? So I think there's two different paths. One is because TV Gone Jewy has been kind of your umbrella term for both like your collection and ahaing of moments and the presentations that you do. But I imagine you started noticing Jewish representation before you started collecting the moments. So I'm curious, like, growing up watching TV, what are some of the first moments that stick out to you or when you think about Jewish representation in TV?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I will say that one of the things that I noticed like super early on is the absence of Jewish characters. So I grew up kind of modern Orthodox-ish, but like traditionally Jewish, went to Jewish schools, was part of a Jewish community, didn't go to public school. So my entire realm, you know, in lived experience was always Jewish. However, once I started becoming interested in TV and film and whatever, there wasn't a lot of Judaism to be seen. So I had this real sense that in terms of the popular culture, that I was othered in a way that I wasn't in my lived life, which was totally, in some ways, separate from, you know, the popular culture and the popular things. So it was always very surprising for me when anything popped into a TV or a TV show or a film that had some Judaism to it. So everything from just the throwaway lines, like in Superman 2, there's a line where Superman is rescuing a kid who fell over Niagara Falls, and as he's emerges from the falls with the child in his arms, you hear this old lady in the crowd going, "Of course he's Jewish. It's such a nice man. Of course he's Jewish." And it was just like, what? It was like you didn't even really see her say it. It's kind of like off camera, and if you miss it, you miss it. The music is very loud and soaring because it's about the rescue rather than the fact that this woman is like in the crowd being like, "He must be Jewish." So there's that. You know, there was a scene in Top Secret, which is a Val Kilmer movie that's. It's very much like kind of a parody in the realm of the airplane movies.
Yeah, Naked Gun,
and
right?
Naked Gun. Yeah, it's like the same guys behind it, I think. And so there's a lot of slapstick in that movie. And there's one scene where somebody was talking about how the bad guys are launching a missile next Sunday. And so you hear Val Kilmer react. He goes, "Sunday, but that's Simchas Torah." And relating to this obscure holiday that I wouldn't say is among the top 5 of Jewish holidays that people know.
No.
And this was in the 80s. So like I think the late 80s. So like it was definitely before anybody was like, hey, let's create a Jewish character or let's create some Jewish awareness. It was just very much a throwaway kind of slapstick thing. And it loops back later because they announce again that the date's going to be Sunday, and somebody goes Sacre Bleu, and somebody else goes Simchas Torah. So it's just just like you if you do the equivalent of an audio blink. I don't know what the term is for that is, but you'll just miss it, or you'll think, "Did I just hear that?" And so that's kind of like those are the hidden in plain sight but throwaway lines that I thought were really hilariously random and made me feel included for at least a second, but they weren't actually, bringing any meaning into it. It was just a punchline. So, which I appreciated, because I thought that's all we get.
Right.
But as I started consuming more and more culture, there was always the winter episodes of every single soap opera or other show where they're like, Merry Christmas to everyone except for you, Dr. Goldstein, a happy Hanukkah. Or you see, we have a Chanukiah. Well, they don't say Chanukiah, they say we have a menorah, or like gather around the Christmas tree or the menorah, and it's just like, I get it. You're just acknowledging difference, but without any kind of context of meaning. So I went from wanting to be seen and mentioned and included to wanting the presence of those moments to actually anchor a character in meaning or in motivation or inspiration or something like that. So that's kind of what we've seen more of certainly in the last 10 years, as more Jewish creatives decide to incorporate parts of their Jewish identities into their work, however they define that. So that's been really thrilling to watch.
That's so interesting, because what you didn't bring up were on a very special episode.
Oh, yeah.
Like those aren't the moments that like stick out to you, because I can remember, not well enough, the Drummonds. There's a white rich man who adopts.
Yeah, Different Strokes.
Different Strokes, thank you. Like on Different Strokes, there's an episode where Arnold gets stuck. The elevator breaks down, and the elevator repairman, not the elevator repairman, the operator, is a Holocaust survivor.
Oh.
And you find out because they're stuck in the elevator for hours, and eventually this man has to take off his suit. Like, it's too hot, and he rolls up his sleeves, and he's got a tattoo. So there were those, I'm sure, in the 80s, the very special episodes with some Holocaust education in them.
Yeah.
But I so those I remember because I wasn't Jewish growing up. So those things stick out to me, but a casual Simchas Torah, I just would have thought it was French I didn't know. I'm sure I just thought it was French I didn't know.
And I'm sure everybody did, especially in the second reference where they're like, Sacre Bleu. It's supposed to be like it's a group of French activists, French, what do they call that? Like a SWAT team. Yeah, I think so. I don't remember that Different Strokes episode, but I do remember in the Wonder Years, there was an episode about Kevin's best friend Paul's bar mitzvah. And what's interesting is that the Wonder Years was rebooted recently with a black kid at the center and his family as the central characters. And his best friend also has a bar mitzvah. And it turns out, because this is the way the world works, is that I actually know the person who wrote that episode. So she came on our podcast and talked about it.
It's a very good episode.
Thank you.
Your interview with her, and then I went and I watched the episode because of your interview.
Oh, good. Yeah, I mean, I think, there's as somebody who has a very deep Jewish background and Jewish education, there's a lot that I can be critical about in terms of Jewish portrayals on TV. And I think that where I'm most critical is where it seems like lazy rather than misunderstood. I think that there's a lot of, this is something I point out in my presentations also, is that almost I would say probably 75% of the time that Hebrew appears on TV, it's either backwards or the letters are inverted so that either the characters themselves are backwards or they're in the wrong order because somebody just says, oh, you're sounding it out or whatever, and they put it in and they didn't notice because they don't speak Hebrew and they didn't have anybody come in to say, actually, just flip that image, just
Right.
So I think that's kind of like technically lazy and somebody should be looking at that. But if somebody comes along with an interpretation of Jewish observance or text that isn't the way I understand it, that's fine. Like I don't have an issue with that. And in fact, I love that. I love that somebody can come in and look at text that I've seen 100 times and see something new in it. But I think it has to be consistent with the overall narrative of Jewish observance. So I think that there's a lot to talk about, and also you brought up the Holocaust as like a way to introduce the Jewish idea, and that's very much like something that I think has just become part of like part of the popular culture is that if you want to introduce a Jewish character who's of a certain age, you show that they've got a number on their arm. And while that it can be very effective, it can entirely roots the Jewish experience in the Holocaust, which which is not the same thing as me saying Esther said we should all forget the Holocaust, because I don't want to get quoted in that way.
No.
But
there's
but
there's a lot more to Torah and Jewish life than the Holocaust. And
anchoring
a lot of Hollywood and a lot of people a lot of people think modern Jewish identity is only your relationship to the Holocaust, and that's such a it's an important link to keep, but it is not the only reason to be Jewish or the only thing to know about Judaism.
Right. And I think that the idea of like, why do you do Jewish? Is it because of the Holocaust, or is it because of the Holocaust or is it just because of it means these things to me to be Jewish, or to, to read Torah text, or to go to a Jewish environment where we can, light candles together for Hanukkah? Like, what does it mean? And I think that that's often been missing. Or the Judaism as punchline has been a way in. And I don't begrudge, especially earlier TV shows, especially those entry points, because as we move farther away chronologically from the 40s and from the Holocaust and the establishment of the State of Israel, people are kind of like settling into their identities in a different way than they were able to in the decades that immediately followed the Holocaust. So I think that what we're seeing now in TV shows like Crazy Ex-Girlfriend from Rachel Bloom and Broad City from Alana Glazer and Abby Jacobson, and we're seeing just a lot more of owning the cultural context of being Jewish and what does it mean? What do our parents pass down to us in terms of how we view our identity, and what about that legacy resonates and doesn't resonate with us? And so you're seeing that a lot. I mean, I'm Gen X. I think you are too.
I am also Gen X, yeah.
But we're seeing it more with millennials and then with Gen Z about like this understanding that identity just doesn't have to be singular, and what do they call that? The blinders on, like single focus,
mono
vision.
But it's not Monopoly. Yeah. It's not Mono Agapian. He is a podcaster and comedian.
All right, listen to two people over the age of trying to remember something. So, but it doesn't have to, or monochromatic, maybe. Monochromatic. It doesn't have to be so singularly focused, is my point. I think we can let it go, Leah. You probably have other things you want to remember today. So
Mom will tweet. She'll fact check us on that word.
Okay, good.
There's a bookstore in Chicago named that word, and I can't remember it.
Are you talking about like the monocle, or like 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 Mr. Monopoly or Mr. Peanut.
Yeah.
But anyway, the point is you don't have to be so singly fast focused. You can say I am, a woman of a certain age, and I'm Jewish, and I live in Los Angeles, and I'm a writer, and like I'm, all of those things. I'm an aunt, and I'm a daughter, and I'm a sister, and I'm a midnight toker. No, I'm not. I'm just, a joker. I'm a smoker. No, so I think that you can be all of those things, and they don't always come with you to every episode of life or a TV show, but they're always kind of there in the background. And sometimes they take center stage. There was a really interesting episode of Broad City where one where they actually found a Holocaust survivor and schlepped him around New York all day because it turned out that they found out via an ancestry test that one of them was related to him. And so they decided to connect to their roots by schlepping him around New York with them. And then there was another one where it was basically just Abby and Alana fasting on Yom Kippur. And they were just talking on the phone the entire time. They weren't in synagogue, but they were fasting, and they were going to fast till the end and talking about, what it means to fast and all the other things that they like to talk about, being very explicit about sex and masturbation and all of those things, which are not, I'm going to be honest with you, weren't part of the discussion of Yom Kippur when I was growing up. So, but it is a way of bringing in all those multiple identities and not leaving one behind just because it's Jewish. So I really have been appreciating that. Even if it's not the way I observe Judaism or not the way I talk about Yom Kippur, it's applying that interpretive lens in a way that's meaningful and connected. So I'm really appreciative of those kinds of things.
And shows a different way of doing Yom Kippur. That it doesn't just have to be the Maisel way of being in synagogue all day and your clothes are itchy and you're fighting during a quiet time. Also, the word is myopic.
Oh, yeah, that's
I had to look at a map of Chicago bookstores because I could not find it on Webster.
Yeah, but myopic is myopic. Nearsighted. So it's because that's what myopia is. So anyway, but I think that the idea of people bringing their authentic selves to their creative work is just so important. And I love that it's there. And Alana Glazer, honestly, even beyond Broad City, almost everything I've ever seen her in, there's a reference to, she talks about her Jewish hair and I don't necessarily relate to Jewish hair because I have straight hair, so that doesn't really mean anything to me. And as we expand the definition of what Jewish is, that means probably less and less. But for her, it's a point of identity, and so she talks about it. So I think that all of those things are important. Rachel Bloom's created a bunch of really Jewy songs for Crazy Ex-Girlfriend that really delve into Jewish guilt and, remembering the Holocaust. And, even though, people could be progressive but still support Israel. And there's all of that people's parents got very competitive in these very Jewish communities that were very academically focused, and there was a lot of so all of that is true. It may be for some people kind of distasteful to point out, but as long as it's not the only reference that we have for what a Jew is, then that's the most important thing, right?
Right.
So
I thought that something you said this week during your preparing to watch Mrs. Maisel episode was you talked about how Astrid is portrayed as joyfully Jewish. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious if as you're seeing more ways of being Jewish, are there other characters you've seen or moments you've seen where they're focused more on the joys of Judaism or the joys of being Jewish, or they're framing it in a less Sturm und Drang way?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I wish that I had more. I wish I had more examples to give you of people who were joyfully, because joyful Judaism isn't something that you hear a lot of, that you necessarily associate. You get Jewish guilt, Jewish mother, Jewish food, like all of those things. But they're just in some ways like kind of a fait accompli. It's not really something that you carve out for yourself. But because Astrid is a Jew by choice, she came into it and somehow now cares more about Judaism than anybody else in the family seems to. So I think, and she's concerned about doing it right. And it's because of Astrid that we hear names of previously unuttered Jewish holidays like Tisha B'Av, in an Amy Sherman Palladino series, right?
Yeah.
Right. Astrid wants to do everything according to Jewish law because she wants to belong. But the reality is that in her family, that doesn't really help her belong. It actually just makes her stand out more. So in some ways, that also makes a larger point about how people who are grown up with Judaism sometimes have a dismissive idea toward the observances, whereas somebody who's coming in might appreciate them more. So, that's something that I've seen also with my friends who are Jews by choice. So,
and there's no conversion to secular Judaism. There's no like panel of 3 comedians, and like a schwitz that'll be like, all right, now you're a secular Jew. You can make all the jokes. You can eat the bagels. Right. But also like go to the buffet for lunch on Yom Kippur.
Right. I think there should be.
There should be.
Why not a secular Beit Din of Reuben chowing, comedians who, give you like a tight 5 at the beginning of your conversion ceremony, right?
Yep.
So I think that's a great idea.
I would watch that sketch. I wouldn't. It doesn't need to be a whole movie or a whole episode or anything, but like the sketch be a good sketch.
Right. Well, I feel like now that we're riffing on sketches, I feel like converting to secular Judaism might be also well paired with a converting to skeptical Judaism, or converting to dismissive Judaism, or but then it kind of becomes an expansion of the Tim Whatley converting for the jokes situation, from Seinfeld, which is of course also like one of those shows that was Jewish without being Jewish.
That it was coded Jewish.
Yeah.
Because it was New York for some people.
New York, yes.
Right. So when did it become something that you collected and did presentations on? Like how did it go from like making a mental note to like making it something that you are increasingly seen as an expert in? Yeah.
I think, it was partially because I kept saying that there was TV, that TV was going Jewy, and nobody was believing me, because there wasn't like, it wasn't like Rabbi Mendel solves the case at CSI. It was always like, there was always just the presence of these moments was blink and miss it, punchline oriented, or something that for some reason embarrassed the Jewish community and they didn't want to talk about. Mm-hmm. So like when I started seeing more portrayals, because more portrayals means that the burden of representation is taken off a single portrayal and kind of spread across, so that you can say, there are many different ways to be a Jewish character on TV. But on Law and Order, it's pretty much for the last 20, 25 years, like they almost like once every season, they have like some murder or rape that happens in a community where the only people who would have witnessed it were Jews, and it was Shabbat, so they can't reach anybody. That's been a bunch of times. Oh, only the kosher bakery across the street has video footage, but they're closed for Shabbos. That's kind of like or there's like a community where they're keeping secrets because they're so insular, and then it's a Hasidic Jewish community. There is a conference called Limud, which you talked about earlier, which is about just really exploring the range of connection to Jewish life, meaning texts, culture, etc. And when I started I learned about Limmud actually when I was still living in New York, but when I moved to LA about 13 years ago, I became connected with the Limmud LA community here, and what they really tried to encourage was for people to share kind of experimental ways of connecting to Jewish life and culture. So, like, while I could go in and say, "Hi, my name is Esther, and I'm going to do a reading of the book of Esther and like tell you how I connect to it." Like, and that could be a thing that I do. You know, I can also do something that's less traditional and less text oriented, or where the text is TV. And that's kind of where I came up with this TV Gone Jewy kind of like catch-all to describe these moments on TV where it's not like you're tuning into, Leah, Esther, and the Rebbe, CSI,
Right.
It's like some other random show that you're watching, and all of a sudden, that person would never have done that because they can't carry outside the Eruv because it's Shabbat and you're not allowed to carry outside, this particular point, this particular borderline in the Jewish community, right? And I was like, wait a minute, what? So the wait, what kind of things really started, I would say probably about 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
15 years ago. And then it just became more regularly featured. So, and I have friends now across the country and around the world who send me like links to things that they're watching because I can't watch everything. So I have a friend who has been watching Nancy Drew on the CW, and there was like a number of supernatural things that happened on that show that were related to a Dybbuk, a demon in Yiddish literature. There was an episode
all
about
the
a
supernatural shows end up either with a Dybbuk or a golem at some point.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And in fact, I just tooting my own horn that I just won this prize from the National Arts and Entertainment Journalism Awards for a piece that I wrote about how TV embraced Jewish lore like Dybbuks and golems and things like that. So it's a real thing. And, I think in the mystical shows, there's always been kind of like a mystique around Hebrew because, there's foreign letters and it's like old. And every time you get that, you get like, those are deep wells for mystical references. So that's been really interesting. But there's been more than that. On Nancy Drew, there's a character whose father always expects him home for Shabbat dinner on Friday nights. So like, that's just kind of part of the background for the characters, even if they're not like actively going to synagogue every day. That doesn't have to be the way Judaism is expressed on TV. So, I get these people sending me things all the time, and I really appreciate having the extra eyes out there and being known for this person who's interested in collecting these things.
Yeah. Right. Your newest batch of interns, the Corman siblings from Friday Night Movie Podcast, who I think are thrilled to finally have someone to receive their Jewish clips.
Yes, they are. We really found each other, I think.
Yeah.
And they have been asking me questions like, did you ever see on this show when this happened? Or, what do you think about this? Or did you ever see, and I was thinking it was Becky Corman who was like, did you see in The Expanse season 6? I'm like, no, I haven't seen any of The Expanse.
Right.
And now I have to watch 6 seasons to get the Jewish character. So like,
right. Or you could just watch the episode.
I guess so, but that's not my process, Leah Jones.
Right.
My process is to spend as much time in front of TV as I can. So
yeah, something that this isn't even recent. This is much earlier in the pandemic when I thought I could still read, which I can't.
Right.
I picked up Abigail Pogrobin's one of her earlier books, Stars of David, right, where she interviewed all these celebrities who were Jewish. And I want so much for you to do the second edition of the book, because all these Jewish directors and producers and actors are talking about how like Jewish content is verboten. They can't do it in Hollywood. They can't express their Judaism through their movies and TV shows. And I read a number of interviews of those little essays where they're just like, no, absolutely not. No, my Jewishness, my Judaism does not come through. It's not safe. We can't do it. And that was published in the maybe late 90s, early aughts.
Yeah.
And I just think it's interesting how quickly things started to shift.
It's funny that you mentioned that book because I did a review of it for something, I don't know, for some magazine. And so I had the opportunity to talk to Abby Pogrebin like early on about this book. Maybe it was Hadassah magazine. It was something, I don't, was that a cat?
Yes, he woke up, he's drinking water. He is senile. He just looked at me. He's like, I'm not senile.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, cat. So sorry, I just totally made me lose my track of thought.
He makes the weirdest noises.
Well, I guess it keeps you on your toes.
Come here.
What was I even saying?
That you had the opportunity. Here we go.
To talk to Abby Pogrebin, right? So
yeah.
And so and I've spoken with her a couple of times more recently too. And I told her, I said, if you ever want to do a second book, let me know because I feel like I should be involved in that. But yeah, I think I was also struck by those interviews where they're like, yeah, we'll agree to be in the book called Stars of David because I guess we are technically Jewish, but like that's not what my work is at all. And so, and that's still the case for many of them. I think, Spielberg doing Schindler's List, kind of put the cat out of the bag, so to speak. Sorry, we're not going to put any cats in bags. I'm just telling you the other residents of your apartment. So, but I think that, Spielberg, like I said, cat's out of the bag. Spielberg's Jewish.
We figured it out.
We figured it out. And his mom opened that kosher restaurant here in Pico Robertson when she was alive. You used to go there and like have a nice dairy dinner, and she would tell you about her son and all he's accomplished. It's just like very Jewish.
Everything Stevie's done.
Yeah, there were posters everywhere.
Him in the movies.
Right. Right. Everybody who went there was aware who her son was. So that wasn't like a big revelation. But, so you have the opportunity to sit over dinner, like a nice dairy dinner with a piece of salmon or, something like that with Steven Spielberg's mom was just like about the most Jewish thing you could do. So, but I think that, I think Sarah Jessica Parker is maybe in that book also. But there's like a lot of people who we know to be Jewish for whom Judaism is not a talking point or a reference really. So I think that that's changing. I think it has to do with the same reason of like, comedy is tragedy plus time, right?
Right.
So, Jews had a lot of tragedy, still do some days of the week. But, the tragedy and trauma of the Holocaust kind of led a lot of people who survived that experience to say, let's just not piss anybody off. And, we'll be under the radar or we'll be over the radar, but not as Jews. So, and that's a lot of what went into building Hollywood is Jewish studio directors who changed their names and did not in any way connect to being Jewish and certainly would never champion a Jewish project because that would call attention to their roots. So I think we're seeing more people as we're so many decades out from that experience. With each passing decade, you see people saying, but this is part of me and here's how I want to interpret it. And if I'm being a true creative and, bringing my creative self to this work that I'm doing, then I have to include it in some way. There was, Better Things has had a number of things. I love Better Things. I don't know if you've seen it, but Pamela Adlin's
never heard of it.
Series. It's great. It's an FX show. It was initially kind of co-produced by Louis C.K., but like now not. Now it's fully independent.
I have heard of it.
Yes. See?
Yeah.
But she is really living her experience and bringing her entire background, which is, I think, English and not Jewish on one side and Jewish American on the other side. And she did an episode of Finding Your Roots, and we talked about it on the Bagel Report. But even before she did the episode of Finding Your Roots, like you knew because she was talking about like some of the Jewish members of her family in this show. There was one point at which she was making a film about like a film within the show, interviewing a bunch of older gentlemen, like maybe like in their 80s. And, you know, one of them uses like a Yiddish phrase. And so because that's his vernacular, is to speak in Yiddish phrases, right? So that was part of what surrounded her. And I think that kind of authenticity of showing all of the influences that are around you, instead of trying to say, people need to know that I am this person with this rigid kind of lens, this myopic lens. So, you know, the idea is that we can be there's a prism of both colors and experiences, that we can, and a range that we can engage in. And all of these things can be part of who we are and how we bring our creative work to the screen. So it's not just like, oh, a girl went home from school one day and decided to do this. It'd be like, oh, she has a very complicated history. Her parents have baggage. They're immigrants. You know, one of them is, one of them isn't. That comes like, there's a lot of conflict and misunderstanding that comes from that. The idea of like nuance and the fact that there's no like, you know, while there is like white bread America, I suppose, that really this country is about the diversity of experiences that we all come with. So, you know, seeing that on screen, I think is only good, because it really shows that it really breaks down the idea of stereotypes and the idea that any one Jewish person looks this way, because there's many Jews on TV now. So I think that that's all very interesting. And I continue to study it. I'm actually, I haven't really proclaimed this anywhere, but so you heard it here first on Finding Favorites, the scoop. Right, here it is. I'm actually working.
Hold on.
Yes.
Wait. You're hearing it first, so.
Oh, wow. My first drum roll. Wow, thank you so much.
You're welcome. What are we learning about today?
I feel like we've just built it up to the point where it's not even a thing. It's too much. Yeah. Maybe like half of that drum roll would have done. But no, I'm collecting it into like I don't know if it's a book or whatever the internet version of a book will be, ebook, audiobook, something like that, where I just feel like there's a lot to talk about, and more than I can possibly talk about in the TV Gone Jewy sessions that I've been doing. I always try to reserve like 10 minutes at the end of those sessions to hear what people are talking about and thinking about. And it's a really remarkable conversation starter. And everybody has their things that they hold to as their anchors of Jewish culture, both from when they were growing up, whenever that was, to now, and a current identity. But I think that there's always so much background that I wish I could include in these workshops, you know, about some of the stuff that I just told you about, like how complicated Judaism was for people involved in the entertainment business for the last, you know, for the last 60 to 80 years, and how that's changing and why. But
also continues to be complicated.
Yes, exactly.
Whether it's relationship to Judaism, relationship to Israel, perceived political, constantly increasing conspiracy theories. It is so complicated, I think, to make Jewish content or make TV shows and movies even with Jewish elements.
Yeah. And a part of that is also because in any one production, that one character represents all of Judaism. So it's hard to like give that character nuance and context when really they're just coming in and they'll be like, can I get you a pastrami sandwich? You know, like that's their whole line. Be like, you don't know how they feel about pastrami. You don't know if pastrami is kosher, or if it's going to come out with some cheese on it. Like it's like, you don't know like what that means for that person. And what if they're vegan and they're serving a pastrami sandwich? And it's like, there's just too many, you can't know everything about these characters, especially side characters. So if you're creating characters that have nuance and depth. Usually they're kind of more toward the center of the dialogue and the action.
Right.
Or they're just a stereotype sitting on the sidelines going, oy vey, every once in a while, So
Yeah.
Yeah.
A comment I left on on the Bagel Report's Instagram, and I don't know if it's you or Aaron running it more, because you were talking about the season finale of And Just Like That.
Yes.
Which
Yes,
I have only experienced through recaps and podcasts. Like I tried to watch the first episode, even having spoiled it for myself. And I think I got like 5 minutes in and I was like, oh, it turns out I don't care.
Right.
But I'm curious. So the comment I left was about how, to me, knowing nothing about Hollywood, based on 2 episodes of TV, one of Transparent and one of And Just Like That, that writers seem to be living out their fantasy that their parents would have let them cancel their bar bat mitzvah. Because it happens in Transparent, and it happened they transformed it in And Just Like That, and Charlotte was able to read from Torah for the first time. Even though when you convert, you become bar bat mitzvah as soon as you step out of the mikveh, because you take on the commandments in that moment. But reading from Torah for the first time is very special. I did mine a couple years after I converted. But I'm curious if my hypothesis of Jewish writers fulfilling their dream of having canceled their bar bat mitzvah means anything to you.
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, when Erin and I did our the Bagel Report live yesterday, I was trying to remember where you'd left me this comment. And if you're familiar with the Esther trying to remember face, that I was making that face for a very long time, and I couldn't remember what other thing I was like, she said Transparent, and what else? And what else? And then it was the whole point was that it was just like that. But I didn't view that as an aborted B'nai mitzvah, or they mitzvah, or whatever you wanted to call it. But because Charlotte kind of filled in. But like, the idea, trying to wrap my brain around what that decision was like in that last minute to have Rock say, nope, not going out there. And just how would not have flown for any of us. But, with Transparent, it was a little different. I don't remember the exact circumstance. I have to go back and watch it again, which isn't a bad idea. But I think that part of the reason that these creatives, if this is a trend, the reason these creatives are enacting this fantasy sequence is because it didn't mean enough to them the first time around, or they knew they were doing it for their parents without any kind of anchor into what it would mean for them. And I think we're seeing less of that now because there's more of a personalized approach to B'nai Mitzvah. There's more opportunities for people to, if they have like a learning disability and can't learn, or, they have learning differences and can't learn the Torah text, there are other ways around that. That there's just a way of marking your passage to Jewish adulthood that is maybe different than the way our parents and grandparents grew up with the assumption that it would be the certain way. So,
yeah. It's been really interesting over the last couple of years of our students at my synagogue who wound up having Zoom bar and bat mitzvahs.
Yeah.
B'nai mitzvahs, instead of in person, and delaying the party or doing just something like very intimate with their family. And how many of them felt that was more meaningful than the big thing that they had been prepared for. And we got together with a number of our students a couple of weeks ago, and they split the services up and all read little mini devars and led different prayers to lead services in person. And it was just a really neat opportunity to kind of close the loop on that.
Yeah.
But also we're seeing that, and I see this in my own community and online, that like Rock, kids are coming out earlier and picking new names and and either identifying as non-binary or trans. And it's also, I think, been really good to see the Jewish community flex with that quickly to figure out, all the different things you can call a b'nai mitzvah, or how you can adjust the prayers. And I don't know, I think they were, I don't know. I don't watch in just like that. So I don't really, I guess, have a dog in the fight, other than I would like to see a portrayal of a kid that was into it getting to have the day they were really excited for.
Right. And to
like,
be an
that
active
doesn't have to
partner
be
in
the
planning
conflict.
it. Right.
Yeah.
And that's part of it, is that, it's the parents putting on a party for their kid when their kid doesn't want the attention, or wants the attention to shift in a different space, right?
Yeah.
And because the kid is still young, the assumption is that the parents know best for what the kid. And while in a larger sense, that is probably right. When it comes to identity development, it's not correct. And so, like, I mean, the horse in the fight, or, horses shouldn't be fighting, but dogs in the fight, I don't know. No dog should be fighting everywhere. I don't want anyone to fight ever. Just like the first rule of Fight Club is nobody should be fighting.
Yes.
So that'll make a really great movie.
The first rule of Jewish podcaster Fight Club is like, oh, could we just sit down and have a snack?
Right, exactly.
Can we have a snack? We don't need to fight.
Do you need a snack?
You need some protein.
Do you need a snack? Maybe a nice egg white.
Right.
Just
oh my gosh. There's nothing
a
I like
handful
winding
of nuts.
The best.
So I was going to say that I came from, an observant background, a Jewishly observant background. So for me, reading Torah wasn't in the cards. It wasn't part of the way the kids in the girls in my grade did their bat mitzvah.
Mm-hmm.
But I was able to study the Book of Esther with my grandmother. We studied it over several months, and then I wrote a Dvar Torah about it, and talked about my relation to the name Esther. And we had it in my house, and so I invited just my core friends, which is 12 girls from school. We had like a bunch of family members in the house, and we were outside, we were inside, but it was just a really nice and intimate and meaningful bat mitzvah. And I don't think my parents thought that they were doing anything like incredibly radical, but it was better than just, being acknowledged while I'm sitting behind the mechitza, the separation in synagogue between men and women, that, oh, it's also Esther's bat mitzvah, so join us for Kiddush. Like, what does that mean? That's nothing. And as the bat mitzvah has kind of expanded to be more of a mirror of the bar mitzvah experience, the question is still, is this the best way to kind of like the uniformity of that kind of experience?
Yeah.
Is that the best structure for every kid? And probably it's not. So, you've got a lot of different Jewish innovation organizations that are finding new ways to explore the drama of a synagogue of the biblical narrative, or to tie it to social service, or even like I've seen B'nai Mitzvah kids talk about like Marvel and DC Comics and Star Wars, and like just how do you make this, and this is all part of the work that I do also, is like how do you connect your Jewish self with the other things that are important to you, and that's identity work. So maybe, and this is a little bit I don't know, it's quite drum roll worthy, but So don't get your finger off that button. But I think that, maybe bar mitzvah shouldn't happen when you're 12 or 13. Maybe it should happen at some future point. Or maybe some kid who's like 10 is like, I want to do this now, and let's do this. And, I'm ready. And then, I don't know, like maybe 10's a little early, but is 10 really significantly different than 12 or 13? So,
right.
I don't know. I don't have kids, so I know every kid is different. So
you have stumbled into why the reform movement created confirmation, which was acknowledging that 12 and 13 was young for bar and bat mitzvah. And so the confirmation is like at 15, 16, you're further along in, or maybe 17. I don't really know where it happens in high school, but it was like an older age it kept kids involved in the synagogue a little bit longer. And for a while, it was bigger than, like in our synagogue, we've got walls and walls of photographs of our confirmation students.
Yeah.
Until modern times, it's all modern times, there's photographs. But in the last 20 or 30 years in our synagogue, I think the bar and bat mitzvah got much more significant for the families. I don't know.
Well, I think also part of this whole bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, b'nai mitzvah configuration and the structure, the assumed structure of it being a certain way is very tied into the structure of synagogues,
Yep.
Budgets, and and viability and continuation and all of that, because it provides this anchor of income as well as the anchor of actual people in the seats. And so I think that that's a really important part of it for the synagogue. So the idea of like encouraging a kid to do a bar mitzvah that's maybe not in a synagogue is not in the synagogue's best interests. So it really requires a perspective shift and figure out like I know people who have said, well, I have to go for 2 years to the synagogue before the bar mitzvah so that I can be bar mitzvah there. And I'm like, well, and then what happens? Like, you have to go someplace for 2 years. And then when you have to go someplace for 2 years and then 2 years are up, what do? You don't go back to that thing, right? So
correct.
How do you?
Unless there are younger siblings, they stay until the youngest has become bar or bat mitzvah.
You can just hear the complaints, right? Like, I did this for 2 years. Why do I have to go back, right? So, like, it took me no time to get into that character, even though, like, that was never my character. Like, but I could just picture it. If somebody said to me, even like when I was saying Kaddish for my mother, which was completely optional and only a year long, you know, and there are people who go through that year and are like, I feel like I have to be here every day from here on to the end of time. And I'm like, nope, I did a year. My mother doesn't want me to be here for more than a year. I'm happy to fill in and help other people help other people observe this ritual for themselves. But like for me to come to Minyan every day, that was not something that I wanted to do. So I didn't go. And so now I go back for the yard site. And if, friends have yard sites, or I go to Shiva Minyans to help show up for people who are going through this. But like, and that's even somebody like me who is like very connected to Judaism and like doesn't mind going to shul really. But how much more so, this is like so Talmudic the way I'm saying it, but like how much more so somebody who is younger, not really sure in their identity, feels coerced, feels like there's an end point, and that's the bar mitzvah, that's not the beginning. And even if the rabbi gets up and says, this is just the beginning of your Jewish life, in the inner sigh that you hear is somebody going, oh God, I have to do more of this. Right. So I think that there's got to be a balance between the expectations of the community and the personal passions of the kid who's the center of this event. And if the balance should not be necessarily equal, it should be more tipped toward the kid and their identity. So that's I think that for all of the flaws of and just like that, which there are many, which you are unaware of blissfully.
Yes.
But for the many flaws, it does bring this conversation into the fore. Like I've spent hours now talking about it. So like, is it successful as a TV show? It kind of doesn't matter to me. Like it's bringing things into the conversation, and that's what culture should do. It should get us talking. So
that's fair. For having not watched an episode, I can tell you I'm Team Steve.
That's fair. You're not alone.
Yeah.
Right.
So as we wrap up, what are kind of currently on TV or recently on TV? What are some of the Jewiest things happening on TV or in the theaters today?
That's a really good question. I would say that I am always discovering things, especially because the rollout of culture is not just forward, but also kind of like it's not a flat circle, as they would have said in what's that, True Detective, is just because there's shows coming out all the time that I haven't seen that actually came out in 2017. So like, I've started watching Great News, which I don't know if you know anything about that show.
Yes, it was with she was so funny. Who's the mom in that one?
Yeah, it's Andrea Martin. She's so good.
Oh my gosh, she's so good. Funny.
And it's a Tina Fey thing. The pacing is very similar to 30 Rock. The musical cues also, because it's Tina Fey's husband, Jeff Richman, who does the musical cues also. So like it feels like you took the vibe of 30 Rock, which I very much enjoy, and like kind of transposed it into like you transposed it into like a new work environment. And part of it is like just preposterous in that hyper real kind of way that 30 Rock was also. But Andrea Martin's just a treat to watch. I'm still trying to figure out what the Jewish identity is, because there are a lot of throwaway lines about Judaism. And there is somebody who works in the newsroom who is wearing a yarmulke the entire time. And I'm trying to figure out what his deal is. I'm only like 7 episodes in. But like, I was like, why is that there? You know, it's like, because the default would be, even if it's a Jewish writer, you know, who could say, I've got my nephew's bar mitzvah this weekend, right? Who could indicate in other ways that he's Jewish, you know, that yarmulke is there. So the question is, are we going to see stereotypes regarding the yarmulke, or like, is it just part of the identity? And so like, that's the kind of thing where I discover it. Nobody said anything to me about it. And I was just like, well, why hasn't anybody told me about this guy wearing a yarmulke? And like, maybe it's not a thing.
I don't remember if I noticed when I watched it.
Yeah.
I feel like I must have noticed, but.
And also because of the level of hyper awareness, it's like it's not a reform yarmulke with the satin, you know. It's and it's not a kippas sruga. It's not like a crocheted one like in modern Orthodox. It's one of those like velvet ones, not velvet, like the suede ones, you know, like it's like very like suave and like of the bar mitzvah circuit. Like probably got it at a bar mitzvah, but like now he's wearing it every day, so it's not. Anyway, so there's just like stuff like that. And
it's an interesting choice.
Yeah. Being Erica, which was a show that was around in Canada several years ago also, and has kind of a surrealist, hyper-realistic kind of quality to it. There's almost like a supernatural element to it also. But the character apparently is extremely Jewish. I have watched several episodes and haven't really seen that, but I have friends who have been telling me for years, you need to watch the series. And it's like going off of Hulu in like, I don't know, 10 days. So we'll see if it's like the opposite of a cleanse. It'll be an immersion. Yeah. And just, you know, there are other shows that Yiddish kind of comes in fairly frequently. I'm really noting more kind of like overall trends than one particular show being Jewy. But, you know, there's Yiddish, like oi comes in a lot. You know, there's shtick and schmaltz and schmuck. Those are all Yiddish origin words, but like are making more of an appearance. I actually don't think it's that surprising given the inclusion of, first of all, given the sound of those words, that's kind of a very comedy laden words. Yep. And also because there are so many Jews involved in comedy. So it's not surprising that those things have popped in. But what I have been seeing is more like greetings of Shabbat Shalom, which has been surprising. Sometimes totally not between Jews and just meaning, hey, what's going on? Like, what's up? And I was just like, why is that here?
I guess we didn't all say, but there was probably a wave of alohas. You know, when we learned that aloha means hello and goodbye. Yeah. Like, I feel like maybe in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s surf culture. I don't know.
But that's shalom. Shabbat shalom is a different thing, I think. I think it's a different layer.
I'm sure people in Hawaii were like, that's not really how we say it, right?
Right. I guess so.
I'll have to pay more attention to it.
Yeah. Well, that Shabbat Shalom, I think, is like in the second or third episode of Shrill of the first season, I think. So, and it's like, there's no Judaism in there anywhere. No. It's just weird. And so like, I think that those things, and that in some ways is like similar. There was also Shabbat Shalom in Pose. where there was a particular person who was dressed like all in white. So I'm assuming it was kind of like a Shabbat Shalom because it's Shabbat Queen dressed in white. But like nobody explained that to me. That was just Esther's interpretive lens on it.
Right.
So I think that the more that Hebrew and Yiddish a little bit, but Hebrew as, it becomes like a marker of identifying somebody as Jewish, just like that yarmulke does in Good News.
Right.
And the question is like, how does that expand our knowledge of who that character is, or give that character access to expanded connections, meaning, situations, holidays, rituals, and how does that benefit the overall cultural universe that it lives in? So I'm just like riveted. If you need me, I'll be in front of my TV, watching for these things and posting about them online for sure.
Great. Should I try this season of Maisel? I tried 20 minutes and I was like, I don't think I care about them anymore.
Yeah,
I know you just did a whole live on it yesterday, and if I could just hold steady, it'll be on the Bagel Report this week. But give me the inside scoop. Should I keep watching the first episode?
Without this fascination of how the Maisel universe is going to express Jewish identity, I don't know that I would necessarily be interested either. There's a lot. I feel like I watch it on two levels. And there's a lot of great performances in it. Obviously, there's a lot to be said about like the different whether actors should play Jewish roles, if Jewish or non-Jewish actors should play Jewish or non-Jewish roles. Like, we can have that whole other conversation, which is also kind of one of my favorite things to talk about, even though I don't have the solution. But I think that, the idea, and this is something that you've seen also as part of that historical progression that I talked about before, because Amy Sherman Palladino created the Gilmore Girls and Bunheads, I believe, also. And neither one of those was very Jewish, even though the pacing or the
required
banter,
Friday night dinner.
I mean,
So waspy. So waspy.
Right.
The waspiest required Friday night dinner on the planet.
Right. And there's also like a British series called Friday Night Dinner, which is about the two kids who have to go home every Friday night for Shabbat dinner.
Yeah.
But they don't call it Shabbat dinner, but there is challah, there is wine. You know what? They're Jewish. That's what they're there for. But in the Gilmore Girls, there's not that. But Amy Sherman Palladino now did this thing that's very Jewish, very personal, very connected to her identity as, I think, the daughter of a Belsport comedian. Borscht Belt comedian.
Yes.
Why can't I say this? Like, this is why I'm not an actor, is because I can't say this. Borscht.
It reflects her upbringing and her experience with her dad's career.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So it is personal, and because she's Jewish, it's personally Jewish. So like, so she is giving us a little bit of a window into what her creative life is as a Jewish creative and where it comes from. And so that's one of the reasons I watch it. And like, I don't relate to Midge. This is something that Erin and I always talk about, is that like, I don't think that she's altogether that funny. I appreciate her journey. And what she identifies in the first two episodes of this new season is that she doesn't want to really go out and tell jokes. She just wants to talk and be herself. So really what she wants to do is be like a talk show host, or like just, a podcaster, basically. Her dream life is what we're doing right now. So,
yes. Come join us, Midge. No, don't, because you'd be like instantly successful.
Yeah. Ugh. Yeah. But I don't relate to anything that she does, except that I love, and this is something I said in the podcast also, I love that her kind of railing against what's expected of her has trickled down to some of the other characters too. And I think that is kind of like a motif of it, is that like, in order for things to change, people have to change things. So, and that is something that they end up like articulating a little bit more, because Susie says to Midge, like, that's not the way the business works. And she's like, well, then let's change it. And I think that call to let's change it is in some ways an anachronism, because, that's not what women said back in the 60s.
Right.
But maybe there'll be, because now they're in 1960, like, to be a an encroaching sense of change is coming and revolution. And so what that means in terms of the overall narrative, it'll be really interesting to track. So I'm happy to watch it as an experiment, even if I don't find it that entertaining. Like again, it occupies enough of my brain space and gets those synapses firing, which, as you get older, you want to keep those synapses firing. So I hope it'll all help keep me young.
Esther, where can people find you on the internet? Should they go looking?
Am I on the internet? Wait, did somebody put me on the internet?
Somebody put you.
I think it was you.
On the internet.
You put me on the internet.
I only twisted your arm for Twitter.
Yeah, you're a Twitter twister.
Yes.
Yes. I am on Twitter for the last, 14 or 15 years, courtesy of Leah Jones, at Esther K. I am on Instagram at Esther Kustanowitz, full name, but you can always, find me in all of the various spaces. And we also have a Twitter page, Instagram for The Bagel Report. On Twitter, we are The Bagel Report. On Instagram, we are TBR The Pod. My co-host on The Bagel Report is Erin Ben Moshe, and she's Ebenmoche, EBENMOCHE. But we meet weekly to talk about all the stuff on a podcast, and we hope that some of you will join us and send us questions. If you have any questions about this particular subject matter, you can always email us at thebagelreport@gmail.com. That's a fairly new address, and we look forward to mailbag there frequently. And yeah, I'm always happy to be in the internet talking about these things, and I appreciate your inviting me on today for a second time, Leah. And I'll have to develop another favorite thing in about a year so that you can have me back. Yes.
You can keep up with Finding Favorites on Instagram, Finding Fave Pod, and Twitter as well, Finding Faves Pod with an S. Follow us on Apple Podcast. Man, follow the podcast. Follow.
Do you want to do it again? Take 4.
Follow. Regardless, go on the thing that used to be called iTunes and leave a 5-star rating and a review. Send this episode to your friends. It would be very nice. And keep enjoying your favorite things.
Thank you for listening to Finding Favorites with Leah Jones. Please make sure to subscribe and drop us a 5-star review on iTunes. Now, go out and enjoy your favorite things.